For my safety and the safety of those involved, I have changed names, locations, and certain details in this story. But know this, the events I am about to describe are real. They happened. And if they find out I'm telling you this, I won't live to tell another. They brought me to Sednaya prison in the dead of night, my hands tied behind my back, a sack over my head. I could hear nothing but the hum of the truck's engine and my own heartbeat, pounding like a war drum in my chest. I had heard the stories. Everyone had. This was the place where men disappeared. A prison built not to punish, but to erase. The air inside was thick with blood, sweat, and something worse, fear. I was shoved forward, boots slamming against the cold tile floor. When they ripped the sack off my head, I blinked against the harsh fluorescent light. The first thing I saw were the bodies hanging from the ceiling. They threw me into a cell no bigger than a closet, packed with 6 other men. The walls were damp, the air thick with rot. There was no toilet, just a bucket in the corner that no one dared to empty. Food came once a day, if you could call it food. A piece of moldy bread, a handful of rice, water that smelled like rust. And then there were the beatings. Every morning, every night, for no reason at all. The guards would drag men out into the halls, and we would hear their screams for hours. Some came back, some didn't. One of my cellmates whispered to me in the dark, "They don't care about answers. They only care about pain." I lasted 4 months before I decided to escape. Not because I thought I could make it, but because I knew if I stayed, I would die here. I watched the guards. I studied how they moved, when they took their breaks, where they got sloppy. And most importantly, I found the one weak link. A guard named Hassan. Hassan was different. He didn't beat us for fun. He didn't linger to watch men scream. He did his job, kept his head down. And sometimes, just sometimes, I saw hesitation in his eyes. I waited for my chance. It happened one night, when the power cut out. A common thing in Sednaya. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the prison into pure darkness for exactly 4 minutes before the generators kicked in. For minutes where the cameras were useless. For minutes to make a move. And so I did. I whispered to Hassan as he passed by, his flashlight shaking just slightly in his grip. "You don't belong here. But if you help me, I will make sure you never do again." He stopped. He didn't turn, but he stopped. And that was all I needed. That was the moment the escape truly began. In Sednaya, the only way to survive was to read men's eyes. A guard could beat you, starve you, hang you from the ceiling for hours, but their eyes always gave them away. Some of them enjoyed it. Others didn't care. But then there were men like Hassan. Hassan was afraid. Not of us. Of them. The higher-ups. The men who ran this place like a slaughterhouse. When I whispered those words to him in the dark, I saw a flicker of hesitation. And hesitation? Hesitation can be turned into opportunity. The next time Hassan passed our cell, he didn't look at me. But as he slid the food trays through the slot, a small piece of folded paper landed on my tray. I covered it quickly, waiting until the footsteps faded down the corridor before I dared to look. It was one sentence, written in shaky Arabic. "There is a door in the lower levels, but it is locked." That was it. No promise of help. No second note. Just one fact. A locked door meant a possible exit. And a possible exit was all I needed. I told Omar about the note. He was the only man in that cell I trusted. Omar had been an engineer before the war, locked up for reasons he never talked about. He didn't need to. The scars on his back told the whole story. He frowned at the paper. "A door means nothing if we don't have a key." I nodded. "Then we get one." But keys were never left unattended. Every guard carried their own set, but they never left the prison with them. That meant somewhere in Sednaya, there was a storage room full of extra keys. We just needed to find it. And that meant taking a risk. One night, they took an inmate from our cell, a man named Youssef. He never came back. But the next morning, when they dragged his body through the halls, I noticed something. His arms and legs were soaked, like he had been lying in water. Omar saw it too. He whispered under his breath, "The lower levels are flooded." Flooding meant piping issues. And piping issues meant maintenance workers. And where did maintenance workers keep their tools? In a storage room. A storage room that might also have keys. We needed a way to get downstairs without drawing suspicion. If we just walked down there, they would shoot us on sight. So we created a reason for them to send us. Omar was the key. When the guards came for morning head count, he collapsed on the floor, his body shaking like he was having a seizure. I started shouting, pounding on the cell door. "He's dying. Get a doctor. Get someone." The guards rushed in. They dragged Omar out, but not to the infirmary. They took him down, to the lower levels, exactly where we needed to be. I waited for hours, heart pounding, until they finally dragged Omar back. His face was swollen, his lips split, but he was alive, and in his hand, hidden beneath his sleeve, a screwdriver. That was all we needed. That night, when the guards did their rounds, Omar and I made our move. I had spent weeks loosening the bolts on our cell door, working with nothing but my bare hands and stolen bits of metal. With the screwdriver, we had it open in minutes. We slipped into the halls, sticking to the shadows, to the blind spots I had memorized. When we reached the stairwell to the lower levels, I felt it. That moment where fear and adrenaline mix so perfectly, you can't tell the difference. And then footsteps. A guard turned the corner. One of the real ones. The kind that didn't hesitate to kill. We didn't hesitate either. I grabbed him before he could scream, slamming the screwdriver up, under his chin, through soft flesh. His body twitched, his blood warm on my hands. Then he went still. My first kill, but not my last. I pulled the keys from his belt and looked at Omar. Let's go. We had the keys. Now we just needed to find the door. There was no turning back. The body at my feet was still warm, his blood pooling between the cracks of the concrete floor. My first kill. I told myself it didn't matter, that I had no choice. But part of me knew the truth. A choice had been made. And now, I had to live with it. Omar crouched beside the dead guard, his fingers moving fast as he searched the belt. Keys. A radio. A half-empty pack of cigarettes. He stuffed the cigarettes into his pocket, muttering under his breath. You don't waste things in hell. We had what we came for. Now we had to move. The lower levels of Sednaya were different from the rest of the prison. The walls here weren't just stained with blood, they were damp. The air was thick with the smell of rot, sewage, and something worse. We moved fast, low, using the shadows between the dim, flickering bulbs overhead. Omar pulled the stolen map from his waistband. It wasn't perfect, a hand-drawn copy of something another prisoner had seen once, before they took him away. We never saw him again. But it gave us a direction. West Corridor. Third Junction. Iron Door. That was our exit. If the map was real. If the door was still there. If we weren't walking into a trap. We made it halfway down the corridor before we heard it. A low, wet moaning from one of the basement cells. We froze. I turned my head, just slightly, toward the bars of the nearest cell. There was something in there. Someone. A shape curled on the floor, the pale flash of exposed ribs, eyes wide but empty. I stepped closer. Then the shape moved. I barely had time to register the face before the man lunged for me, fingers gripping the bars with terrifying strength. His voice was raw, cracked, like someone who hadn't spoken in weeks. Don't open it. Don't open it. The door leads nowhere. It's a trap. Omar yanked me back just as the man's fingers brushed my sleeve. Forget him. We don't have time. I swallowed, my pulse pounding against my skull. We kept moving. But the man's voice stayed with me. The door leads nowhere. It's a trap. We reached the iron door minutes later. It was exactly where the map said it would be, a rusted, bolted hatch built into the farthest wall of the western corridor. A black stain spread out from beneath it, soaking into the concrete like old ink. The smell was overpowering, worse than anything else in this place. And then I saw the scratches. Long, deep gouges in the metal, made by fingernails. Omar's breath was sharp beside me. Open it. I hesitated. Then I slid the guard's key ring from my belt, searching for the right one. My fingers were slick with sweat and blood, but I forced the key into the rusted lock. It turned. With a low groan, the door swung open. It wasn't an exit. It was a graveyard. A pit, 6 meters deep, 20 meters across, filled with bones, rotting bodies, and prisoners barely clinging to life. I saw arms sticking out from under piles of corpses, eyes open but seeing nothing. The air was thick with the buzz of flies, the stench of human decay. This wasn't an escape route. This was where they sent prisoners when they didn't feel like wasting a bullet. I stepped back, my stomach tightening. Omar was breathing too fast, eyes locked on the pit. No one escaped, said Naya. Uh-huh. I shook my head. Not through here. Then I heard the footsteps. Heavy. Fast. Guards. Coming our way. We had seconds to decide. We could run, but there was nowhere left to go. We could fight, but we were outnumbered. I turned back to the pit. To the bodies. To the broken men at the bottom, too weak to scream. And I knew what we had to do. Omar's voice was tight with horror. You can't be serious. I grabbed his arm. It's our only way out. The first shot rang out, a bullet striking the wall just inches from my head. There was no more time. I grabbed Omar and jumped. We plunged into the pit, bodies breaking beneath us. And then darkness. We hit the bottom of the pit, bones and bodies breaking our fall. The impact knocked the air from my lungs, the weight of decomposing flesh pressing against me. The stench was unbearable, a mix of rot, sweat, and something worse. For a moment, all I could hear was my own heartbeat, pounding like war drums in my skull. Then gunfire. Bullets ripped through the pit above us, kicking up dust, shredding corpses, but we stayed low, buried beneath the dead. Omar's breath was ragged beside me. This is insane. I pressed my face into the dirt, forcing myself to stay still. The guards wouldn't come down. They saw this place as a graveyard, not a battlefield. If they thought we were dead, they wouldn't waste time checking for a pulse. Minutes passed. Then silence. No voices. No footsteps. Just the slow, sickening drip of blood pooling between the bodies. We had done it. We had vanished. For now. I lifted my head, scanning the pit through the dim light filtering in from above. The walls were smooth concrete, no ladders, no footholds. A dead end. Unless. My eyes drifted to the far side of the pit, where the bodies were stacked highest, and beneath them, a hole, a tunnel, barely wide enough for a man to crawl through, leading into the bowels of Sednea. Omar saw it too. You think it leads out? I shook my head. I think it leads somewhere. And right now, that's enough. We moved fast, pushing bodies aside, our hands slick with blood and sweat. The entrance to the tunnel was cold, a thick draft rolling out like breath from a dead man's lungs. I took the lead, crawling forward, my hands sinking into the muddy, rancid earth. The tunnel smelled like death trapped underground, but I forced myself forward. Because the alternative was worse. We crawled for what felt like hours, the tunnel twisting beneath the prison like an abandoned vein. The walls dripped with moisture, and every few meters, we found bones. Prisoners who had tried this before. Prisoners who hadn't made it. Omar's voice was tight behind me. This wasn't built for escaping. I nodded. No. It was built for hiding. Then, suddenly, the tunnel opened up. I dragged myself out of the crawl space, my knees hitting cold stone. We were in a chamber, low ceilings, damp walls, an old iron door half buried in rubble. Omar stood, wiping grime from his face. What is this place? I ran my hand over the wall, feeling the faintest engraving beneath my fingertips. Arabic. Faint. Old. A single word. Punishment. A shiver ran down my spine. This wasn't part of the prison. It was older. A place built to trap, not hold. Omar grabbed the iron door and pulled. It didn't budge. Locked. I turned to the opposite wall, a small vent, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. The air whistled through it, carrying something faint, the sound of water. An underground stream. Our way out. The vent stretched on forever, the walls tightening around me with every inch. The deeper we went, the more the air thickened. I heard something dripping. Something moving. Then the smell. Rot. Not like the pit. Something fresher. And then, Omar stopped. There's someone here. I tried to move forward, but he was frozen. I followed his gaze. And I saw it. A corpse wedged inside the tunnel, twisted, mouth open in a silent scream, arms outstretched like he had been crawling forward when he died. But that wasn't what stopped us. It was his fingertips. Worn to the bone. He hadn't died from wounds. He had been trapped here. And he had tried to claw his way forward until nothing was left of his hands. Omar whispered, "We're not getting out of here, are we?" I clenched my jaw. "Yes, we are. Move." We finally dropped into the underground waterway, the current strong, rushing toward an unknown exit. Omar shivered. "You sure this leads out?" I wasn't. But the only other option was turning back. We let the current take us, pushing forward through the icy blackness, our bodies battered against jagged rocks. And then, light. A small crack in the stone ahead. Omar grabbed my arm. That's it. We swam harder, faster, lungs burning. The tunnel narrowed, forcing us one at a time through the gap. I went first. My shoulders scraped against the rock, the force of the water nearly ripping me apart. My lungs screamed for air. Then, I burst free. I gasped, dragging myself onto solid ground. Omar followed, coughing up water, his body shaking. We had made it. We were outside the prison. But we weren't safe yet. We collapsed against the cold muddy bank, staring up at the sky, a sky we hadn't seen in years. Then the barking. Omar's head snapped up. Dogs. They knew. They were tracking us. I forced myself to my feet, ignoring the pain, the exhaustion, the hunger. We had minutes, maybe seconds, before they caught up. And then, in the distance, through the haze of rain and mist, I saw it. A truck. A civilian road. A chance. I grabbed Omar. Run. Now. And so we ran. One last time. Toward freedom or death. Our bodies screamed for rest, for food, for warmth, but none of that mattered now. We had to run. Behind us, the howls of the prison dogs cut through the cold air, growing closer with every second. Ahead of us, past the thick haze of rain, was a dirt road. A truck, its headlights flickering through the mist, was moving slowly, too slow to be a military patrol. A civilian vehicle. A chance. A choice. Omar turned to me, his breath ragged. We take it. I didn't hesitate. We take it. We burst onto the muddy road, soaked, bleeding, barely able to stand, but desperate enough to do anything. The truck was less than 30 meters away, an old, rusted Peugeot 504 pickup, its tires spitting mud as it struggled up the incline. I waved both hands. Stop. For a moment, nothing. Then the truck jerked to a stop, its headlights blinding us. The driver stepped out, a thin man in his 60s, dressed in a worn-out jacket, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He squinted at us through the rain. What the hell happened to you? I didn't have time to explain. Omar turned, glancing over his shoulder. No time, dogs are coming. I grabbed the old man by the collar, shoving a knee against his chest before he could react. Keys. Now. His eyes flickered with fear, but also understanding. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the keys. No fight. No shouting. He simply muttered, God help you. I didn't thank him. I didn't have time. Omar and I jumped into the truck, and I slammed the key into the ignition. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. The second our tires hit the road, I saw them, 3 prison guards emerging from the tree lean, rifles raised. A shot cracked through the air, the windshield exploding into a spiderweb of cracks. Go. Omar shouted. I floored it. We sped down the muddy road, the tires slipping, sliding. Behind us, the guards were yelling into their radios. We were out. But we weren't free. Not yet. Where are we going? Omar asked, clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. I gritted my teeth, focusing on the road ahead. North. Turkey. The border was weeks away by foot, but in a truck? Maybe days. Maybe less. If we made it. If they didn't catch us first. For hours, we drove through empty desert roads, the rain turning the dirt into a thick, sludgy mess. Every time I saw headlights in the distance, my grip on the wheel tightened. We knew they had already blocked major highways. Every military checkpoint would be waiting for us. Then, a problem. Up ahead, in the middle of the road, a single military jeep, parked at an angle. A roadblock. 2 soldiers stood beside it, rifles slung over their shoulders, talking, unaware of our approach. Omar tensed. They're checking vehicles. I nodded. Then we don't stop. He turned to me, his voice sharp with disbelief. You're insane. I pressed harder on the gas. Hold on. The choice. The soldiers turned at the last second. Eyes wide. Hands reaching for their weapons. I didn't give them the chance. The truck slammed into the jeep, metal screeching, soldiers diving for cover as we barreled through the roadblock. The impact sent us skidding sideways, nearly flipping the truck. But we held. We kept going. Omar was gripping the dashboard, his knuckles white. Holy shit. Holy shit. I didn't slow down. Because now? Now the entire Syrian army would know where we were. We drove through the night, through endless roads, through checkpoints we avoided by sheer luck. Then on the 3rd day, exhausted, hungry, barely clinging to life, we saw it. The Turkish border. Miles away. So close. But it was crawling with soldiers, guards, military trucks. No way to drive through. No way to sneak across. Omar turned to me. What now? I looked at the river running alongside the road. The border was too well guarded on land. But in the water? A chance. A risk. A final gamble. I met Omar's eyes. We swim. He didn't argue. We ditched the truck, diving into the cold, black water, the current pulling us toward Turkey. As I drifted away from Syria, I thought about Sednaya. About the bodies. About Hassan. About the ghosts we left behind. And I realized something. We weren't free. We would never be free. Because no matter how far we swam, no matter how far we ran, Sednaya never lets you go. Thank you very much for watching my video. I will be very happy if you subscribe to my channel and like this video.